Well, let me tell a few more words on the computer's internet and access to information. It is really interesting in many ways. As I said, it has created very different business models which almost provide free products. It's almost become impossible to sell your product to customers, but basically get what was previously customers basically get something to sell other people. Uh, and Google is basically not a company that is selling search engine, basically ability to search. Google is a company that is selling information of people to the basically other companies. So search engine is just a tool, ironically, to gather that information. It is not its final product in economic sense. It is really that's if you think about it, it's really interesting. And think about Wikipedia, for example. It is not selling anything. It is just alive with the donations, and it is basically let's say entity which exists because people contribute to it as much as they like without any payment voluntarily, and anyone who wants information from it can get it freely. It's almost like communism, actually. You contribute as much as you want, you can get as much as you need. And there are also very small, very many small other examples which are similar to Wikipedia. Take, for example, R, which is a statistical software you can get freely. Well, and then you have other let's say companies like Airbnb, which is basically or Uber, which is basically connecting. To some extent, it is considered as connecting the people who are buyers and sellers. In other ways, I mean, in other according to other interpretations, it is actually hiring people with houses and basically letting people bring their own property, not providing them property to run, letting people to bring all their own property and making profit out of the property of the people who rent their houses through Airbnb. Of course, providing them a service in return which they could not get. I mean, connecting them with the potential renters. So in a way, I mean, whether the people who rent their houses from using Airbnb, are they workers of the Airbnb or are they just using Airbnb? Is Airbnb just providing them a service, or are they partners of Airbnb? Those that definition is not easy to make. So basically, the rise of computer access and increased access of information, it makes it kind of creates an important economic dynamics. It is not solving our problems in many ways. Actually, if anything, I mean, we have many new challenges emerging in recent years, and all challenges they were to some extent get certain problems were partially solved, but at least many challenges are that were existing in 1980s and 90s are still in many ways in front of us. In terms of the word humanity, I mean that when I say us. But it creates opportunities, possibilities, and it also creates questions on what will happen when the economic system adjusts to this new developments fully, and to what extent also basically the full potential of this new developments could be utilized. Okay. especially at the time of COVID-19 crisis, these questions become more interesting when a significant part of the economic system is run by them through internet. Never more than ever before, basically. Now, as an end point, we might ask basically, where are we headed? What is, and well, are we at the time, and many people in economics feel this, at the process of new transformation? Are we at a let's say, period of new transportation, not transportation, transformation, basically, through which we will reach the point when we have another fixed new economic system? And will this new economic system just a transformed version of the old economic system, which might even maintain the old world hegemony, which is the United States? This question is especially asked after basically the USSR has collapsed. It was even argued, as I told you, that United States system will become forever dominant. And when George Bush came into power, interestingly, I mean, in the world, Bush started to maintain economic control and also, to some extent, maintain the U.S. dominance in the economic system, and even to some extent enforce or at least encourage countries to maintain the U.S. type economy and government. He was ready to use the U.S. state power. And that's the time also the US has gone through the militarization process. It has started with the Reagan, but amplified with the Bush, basically. George W. Bush has expressed it in the most negative terms. So it wasn't anymore a fight against the evil superpower who want to take over the world. It was basically now a process the only remaining power is following to create a stable world order. And that militarization itself was actually nothing new. Actually, when you look to the late 19th century and early 20th century, I mean, increased militarization and UK itself was subject of many challenges, inside and outside, as close as even that outside, as close as Ireland and as far as India and Africa. And this expansion to the previously autonomous places like Ottoman Empire, which disintegrated, and China, and African colonization, and expansion of Latin American and American countries, basically including USA and Latin American countries, to the previously indigenous places where Native Americans were living. All of these things were examples where, I mean, the previous economic integration was now taking place at the territorial sense also. So is this a sign of decline? Is a big question. The question we might ask, or is this a sign that the system is stabilizing in a different form? Of course, Bush doctrine, in many ways, you might tell, has been at least temporarily unsuccessful. But will it come back? Well, that possibility is not necessarily completely well, irrelevant, in my opinion, at least. But you might ask yourself. And then the United States was challenged by China in many different ways, but certainly in economic ways, and also its role in supporting other countries' economic development without intervening with them political sense. Well, you might say United States don't support basically governments that are well, harming their citizens, or that are dictatorial. But you might also say that China doesn't intervene to the internal matters of the countries. So there are completely two different views, and the idea against colonialism actually in the developing world to some extent appreciate the second view also, because the previous colonies, especially and semi-colonies, they had this idea that intervention from the West to in the name of developing those countries is actually not a honest intervention, according to this view. So even if you have problems, at least a significant portion of the people in those countries think that we should solve our problems. Although that discussion is by itself an interesting discussion. It has political aspects. It has also economic aspects. The idea that the countries, the developing countries themselves, should decide how to develop, and then the problems start to emerge also in the United States. The protests against inequality, especially. Occupy movement, in that sense, was an interesting movement which has shaped the economic ground once again, almost as much as the economic crisis itself. So people at a supposed time when economic problems were at least not as severe as the time of the economic crisis, depression. Supposedly things were getting better. People said, okay, we don't like this economic system. We want an economic system without this much inequality. And inequality was at the center of this movement, interestingly. At the center, you don't have other things like political problems, ethnical problems. Interestingly, it is predecessors of BLM, which was, well, for right reasons or wrong reasons, ethnic-based movement. But Occupy movement was completely economic-based movement. And lastly, you have case of environment and how much United States is able to meet this challenge and lead the world in, let's say, the struggle against inequality and environmental problems. Is also a question. So, if we have an hegemony, United States maintains its hegemony status. Well, note that hegemony is considered as a country which is able to solve the systemic problems. So, United States, in order to maintain its hegemony status, should be able to solve the systemic problems of the world. For now, its ability to do that is questionable. Internally, there is opposition even to the mildest attempts to be the leader to solve the problems. But this is still an open question, of course, whether the United States could continue its role as the leader solving systemic problems that exist in the world. Now, then the question, we might look to China. And, of course, the capital companies and the companies basically very much like China, and they want to invest to China, and that capital flow to China itself is a question whether China is becoming it gives China this ability to become the new leader in the world, because as capital comes to China and invests in China, China becomes new center of production in the world. And that being center of production itself becomes an important aspect of China, even though in other aspects, for example, being a financial center at first might be more challenging for the country. And even building communications with the rest of the world might be at first a more challenging thing for the country. We will talk more on China in the next part. See you in the next part.